Years later, my brother came back after betrayal. Here's how it all unfolded. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I never thought I'd see my brother again. Not after what he did to me. Not after the night everything burned down, literally and figuratively. For years, I built my life on the ashes of his betrayal, convincing myself he was gone for good. Then last week, as I was locking up the bookstore I manage, I turned, and there he was, standing across the street like a ghost that had finally clawed its way back from the past. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes hadn't changed. The same eyes that once looked at me with laughter and trust, then later with cold indifference as he lied to my face. The last time I saw them, they were filled with greed. That night, he vanished with my savings, left me to clean up the wreckage of our family, and turned everyone against me. Back then, our parents believed him over me. He spun his stories well, painting me as reckless, selfish, and paranoid. He said I ruined the family business, when in truth he had siphoned money, falsified documents, and left debts in my name. I can still remember Dad's furious voice, Mom's tear-stained face, and the moment I realized I was exiled from my own blood. My brother, Daniel, didn't just betray me, he erased me. Seeing him again sent a shock through my chest. I froze, key halfway in the lock, as he stepped forward like nothing had happened. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, almost casual, as if 15 years hadn't passed, as if he hadn't destroyed me. I didn't answer. My throat closed. 1,000 questions roared in my head. Why now? What does he want? Has he come to finish what he started? He studied me with a faint smile, but I caught something behind it. Desperation. Fear, maybe. Then he said the last thing I ever expected. "I need your help." And that was when I knew. This wasn't a reunion. It was the start of something darker. When Daniel said he needed my help, my mind went straight back to the night everything fell apart. 15 years ago, I was 24, still naive enough to believe family meant protection, loyalty, and trust. Daniel and I had inherited our father's auto shop after his health declined. We were supposed to run it together, me handling the operations, Daniel managing the books. At least, that's what he insisted on. I should have seen the signs. The missing invoices, the nervous excuses when suppliers called, the way he dodged questions with a charming laugh. But I didn't. I believed him. I believed my brother. Until the night I walked into the office and found papers spread out across the desk. Bank statements in my name showing withdrawals I'd never made, loan agreements I never signed, and debts that traced directly back to Daniel's handwriting. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just smirked, as if he'd been waiting for me to discover the truth. I remember the fight that followed. Shouting, accusations, my voice breaking as I demanded to know why he'd chosen greed over blood. His answer still echoes in my head. "Because I can't spend my life carrying you." The fire came later that same week. The shop went up in flames in the middle of the night, and the investigation pointed to electrical issues. But I always suspected Daniel. With the records gone, so was most of the evidence of what he'd done. My parents clung to his version of the story, that I was reckless, that I'd dragged us into debt, that the fire was the result of my carelessness. They chose him, not me. After that, I left town. I rebuilt myself from nothing, working odd jobs until I landed at the bookstore, where I've spent years trying to live quietly. I thought if I stayed small, stayed invisible, the past couldn't touch me. But as Daniel stood in front of me last week, it was clear I'd been wrong. The past doesn't vanish. It waits. I looked at him and felt every scar he'd left reopen. He wasn't just my brother. He was the person who had taught me that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it lives under your own roof. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The street was quiet, the neon closed sign flickering in the bookstore window behind me, and Daniel's words hung heavy between us. "I need your help." Help. From me. The brother he abandoned. The scapegoat he left to choke on the ashes of his lies. My first instinct was to laugh in his face, but my body betrayed me. I just stared, frozen. Finally, I managed. "You've got some nerve." My voice was low, unsteady, but it carried years of resentment. Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his hands raised as if approaching a wild animal. "I know what I did," he said, though his tone lacked real remorse. "I can't undo the past, but I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. And you're the only one I can turn to." I almost walked away right then. But curiosity, the same poison that ruined me years ago, kept me rooted. What kind of trouble could bring him crawling back after 15 years? He glanced around, paranoid, as if someone might be listening. That's when I noticed the changes in him. His clothes were wrinkled, expensive once, but worn now. His face carried lines that weren't just from age, but from stress. His eyes darted constantly, never resting. This wasn't the confident, smooth-talking Daniel I remembered. This was a man cornered. "Not here," he muttered. "Let's go somewhere private." I shook my head, bitterness rising in my chest. "You burned every bridge we had, Daniel. You don't get to show up and demand my time." For the first time, his mask cracked. His voice trembled. "Please. It's about them. They'll come after me. And maybe after you too." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Who were they? What had he dragged into our lives this time? Against my better judgment, I unlocked the bookstore door and let him inside. The smell of old paper and ink filled the silence as he followed me in, shutting the world out behind us. That's when he said something that made my blood run cold. The bookstore felt smaller with Daniel inside. He paced between the shelves like a man being hunted, running his fingers across the spines without seeing a single title. I sat behind the counter, arms crossed, waiting. If he wanted something from me, he'd have to earn it. Finally, he stopped, pressed both palms onto the counter, and leaned forward. "I owe people money," he said. His voice was hushed, almost swallowed by the hum of the old ceiling fan. Not the kind of people who send polite reminders. The kind who make you disappear if you don't pay up. I wanted to roll my eyes. Of course it was money. It was always money with Daniel. But there was something different in the way he said it. No swagger, no clever spin, just raw panic. "How much?" I asked, against my better judgment. He hesitated, then whispered, 200,000. The number punched the air from my lungs. I stared at him, searching his face for the old smirk, the one that always told me he was playing some twisted game. But there was no smirk, just fear. "And you came to me?" My voice cracked, anger boiling to the surface. "After everything you stole from me? After you torched our family and left me with nothing?" He dropped his gaze, shame, or something close to it, shadowing his features. "Because you're the only one left who might still care. Mom and Dad won't even answer my calls. They cut me off years ago." Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I thought my parents had chosen him, defended him, worshipped him. But now, he'd burned them too. I shook my head, bitter laughter spilling out. "You're unbelievable. You think walking in here, dumping your mess in my lap, is going to erase the past?" He looked up, eyes wet but unblinking. "It's not just about me anymore. If I don't pay, they'll come after anyone close to me. That includes you." For the first time in years, I saw something in Daniel that I couldn't quite place. Was it fear for himself, or fear for me? And against every instinct, I realized I needed to hear the rest. Daniel sat heavily on one of the creaky wooden chairs near the counter. His hands trembled as he rubbed his face, leaving streaks of sweat across his temples. I'd seen him fake tears before, but this time his fear felt real. "Who's after you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. For a long moment he didn't answer. He stared at the floor, like a child rehearsing a lie. Then, finally, he muttered, "Merrick Koval." The name hit me like a stone in the chest. I'd heard it before, always whispered, always in the kind of conversations that died when you entered the room. Koval wasn't just some lone shark. He was the kind of man whose reach crawled through every corner of the city. Illegal betting rings, underground clubs, unmarked warehouses. People didn't cross him twice. "You're telling me you borrowed money from him?" I hissed. Daniel nodded slowly. "I didn't have a choice. Business deals fell apart. I was desperate. He promised quick cash, no questions asked. I thought I could flip it, pay him back, and walk away clean." His voice cracked, but the deals soured. "And now he wants blood, not money." I leaned back, my stomach turning. "So what? You expect me to just hand you $200,000? You think I've been hiding that kind of cash in a bookstore register?" He shook his head frantically. No, I don't need money from you. I need your help to get something back. Something that belongs to us both." His words landed heavy. Us both? I hadn't shared anything with Daniel since before the fire. I opened my mouth to demand an explanation, but he was already digging into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a folded, yellowed envelope, edges frayed with time. "This," he whispered, sliding it across the counter, is the reason I'm still alive. Inside was a faded deed. My eyes scanned the name at the top, and my heart nearly stopped. The paper felt brittle in my hands, as if it had been pulled from a coffin. The ink had faded, but the name at the top was unmistakable, our father's. I blinked hard, scanning the rest of the document, and there it was, his signature, and beneath it, mine and Daniel's names listed as heirs to a piece of property I'd never even heard about. A house, or rather, land. 30 acres outside the city limits, near the old quarry where Dad used to take us fishing. The deed confirmed it had never been sold, never transferred. Legally, it still belonged to us. I looked up at Daniel, my stomach twisting. You're telling me this exists? All this time? He nodded, swallowing hard. Dad never told us. I found out after he died. The land is worth a fortune now. Developers have been sniffing around that area for years. Koval knows about it. That's why I'm still breathing. He wants it signed over to him as payment. I dropped the deed on the counter like it was burning my skin. So this is it. You dragged me back into your mess because you gambled away your soul, and now you want me to save you with something that should have been ours both along? His jaw tightened. It is ours both, but you wouldn't have known about it if not for me. I felt the old anger surge. He still couldn't help himself, always twisting the knife, always framing his betrayal as some kind of favor. My chest burned with memories of that night, the fire, the accusations, the way my parents turned from me because of him. And now he expected me to trust him again? But beneath my rage, another thought took hold, quieter but sharper. If the deed was real, then Daniel wasn't lying about everything. And if Koval wanted it badly enough, it meant the land was more valuable than either of us imagined. Why now? I asked finally. Why come back after 15 years? Why me? Daniel's eyes locked on mine, and for once, there was no smirk, no pretense, only terror. Because if I don't deliver that deed in 3 weeks, Merrick Koval won't just take me down. He'll come for you too. I didn't sleep that night. The deed lay on my kitchen table under the dim light, its yellowed edges taunting me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames licking the walls of the old auto shop. My father's face twisted with disappointment, Daniel's smirk when he walked away for the last time. I hated him, but the document was too real to ignore. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. The smell of dust and paper hung heavy in the air, and the clerk behind the desk barely looked up as I handed her the folded deed. I need to know if this property is still valid, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She adjusted her glasses, typing slowly, the keys clicking in a rhythm that made my chest tighten. After a few minutes, she raised her brows. Well, this is interesting. Yes, the land exists. It was registered under your father's name back in 1982. No record of transfer since. Legally, it still belongs to the heirs. She paused, looking at me over her glasses. That's you and your brother, correct? My stomach dropped. It was real. 30 acres of untouched land, forgotten by everyone but Daniel. I left the office with a copy of the record, my head spinning. On one hand, the land could change my life. On the other, it tied me back to the man who had nearly destroyed me. I walked through the city streets, clutching the folder, when a voice stopped me. Didn't think I'd see you here. I turned, and my blood ran cold. It was Owen, a childhood friend who'd drifted away after the fire, one of the many who chose Daniel's version of the story over mine. His suit was sharp, his smile practiced, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He glanced at the folder under my arm, then leaned closer. Careful with what you're digging up. That land isn't just valuable, it's dangerous. Before I could ask him what he meant, he walked off, leaving me frozen on the courthouse steps. Owen's words rattled around in my skull the rest of the day. Dangerous. Not just valuable, not just contested, dangerous. What the hell could a piece of land hold that would make someone like Merrick Koval circle it like a vulture? That night, after the bookstore closed, I found myself pacing in my apartment, the deed spread across the table again. The lines of the survey map seemed to blur under the lamplight. I hadn't been near the quarry since I was a kid, but I remembered it well. Tall trees, a half-collapsed shack, and a silence so heavy you could hear your heartbeat. It didn't feel dangerous then, just forgotten. I called Owen. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm but clipped. Should have known you'd reach out. What did you mean? I demanded. Why is the land dangerous? There was a pause, long enough to make me think he might hang up. Then he sighed. Your father didn't buy that land just to fish. He kept it quiet because of what was underneath it. Underneath? I asked, my throat dry. Old quarry tunnels, Owen said. Back in the 70s, before regulations tightened, companies dumped things out there. Chemicals, waste, even cars that weren't supposed to be traced. Rumor was, people too. His voice lowered. That land is poison, but it's also leverage. Anyone who controls it controls what gets exposed, or what stays buried. I pressed my hand to my forehead, trying to process. And Koval. Owen let out a humorless laugh. Guys like him don't want the land for nostalgia. They want control. If a developer buys it, they'll find more than dirt. And if the wrong people start digging, it'll drag a lot of powerful names down with it. Koval's making sure that doesn't happen. When the call ended, I sat in silence. Daniel hadn't told me any of this. Was it ignorance? Or was he hiding the truth again? The deed wasn't just paper. It was a key. A dangerous one. And now I had to decide if I was going to keep holding it, or if it was going to bury me. I didn't bother calling first. I marched straight to the rundown motel where Daniel had been staying, the copy of the deed clenched in my hand like a weapon. The place reeked of stale cigarettes and bleach, the kind of stopover where people hid more than they slept. I found his room, door cracked, television flickering blue against peeling wallpaper. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. When he saw me, he straightened, trying to compose himself. You found out, didn't you? He said, voice flat. I tossed the folder onto the bed. The land. The tunnels. The dumping. You didn't think that was worth mentioning? His jaw worked, but no words came at first. Finally, he muttered, I wasn't sure you'd believe me, and I didn't want to scare you off before you even heard me out. Scare me off. My laugh was sharp, bitter. Daniel, you dragged me back into this after 15 years of silence, handed me a death sentence wrapped in a deed, and you decided which parts one was allowed to know? You haven't changed. He stood, bristling. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to crawl back to you, tail between my legs? I didn't. But Koval doesn't care what you or I want. That land is leverage, and he's willing to kill for it. I stepped closer, my voice low. Then tell me the truth. All of it. What did you get yourself into? For a moment, I thought he'd resist. His lips pressed thin, his eyes darting like they used to when he was about to spin a lie. But then something shifted. Fear won out over pride. He exhaled, shoulders slumping. Koval doesn't just want the land, he said. He wants what's buried there. I was stupid enough to promise I could get it for him. My skin prickled. And what exactly is buried there, Daniel? He looked me dead in the eyes, and for the first time since his return, his voice shook. Bodies. The word hung in the stale motel air, heavier than smoke. Bodies. My mind scrambled for footing, for some way to dismiss it as one of Daniel's games. But there was no smirk this time, no glint of satisfaction in his eyes, only fear. I paced the room, the carpet crunching under my shoes. You expect me to believe Dad bought land sitting on top of a graveyard? Daniel shook his head quickly. Not Dad. He didn't know. Or maybe he did and kept it buried, I don't know. But I heard things after he died. Whispers about the quarry tunnels. Koval believes there are people down there. Men who disappeared when they crossed him or his friends years ago. And if anyone uncovers them, it'll tie back to names that can't afford to be exposed. I stared at him, all rising in my throat. This was insanity. And yet, Owen's words came back, the way he said dangerous like it carried its own weight. He knew something, maybe more than he'd admitted. So what? Koval thinks he can erase his past by controlling the land. I asked. Daniel nodded. He told me straight, sign it over, or he'll make sure I vanish like the others. And if he finds out you're involved, he broke off, rubbing his face. He won't hesitate. I leaned against the wall, pressing my palms into the peeling wallpaper. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him this was all his fault, that he deserved whatever hell was clawing at his heels. But the word bodies wouldn't leave me. What if it was true? What if beneath the trees and dirt of that forgotten land lay more than toxic waste and rusting cars? What if Daniel had dragged me into something far darker than debts and forged papers? I met his gaze, my voice sharp. You've lied to me before, Daniel. You ruined my life with your lies. So tell me, why should I believe you now? He swallowed, eyes glistening, and whispered, because I'm terrified. And I've never been terrified before. 2 days passed before I could bring myself to go. I told Daniel nothing. I didn't want him anywhere near me when I set foot on that land. If this was another one of his lies, I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. And if it wasn't, then I needed to know what kind of nightmare I was standing in the middle of. The drive out was like stepping into an old photograph. The highway gave way to winding country roads, lined with trees that seemed taller and denser than I remembered. My stomach tightened with every mile. When the sign for Gravel Ridge Quarry appeared, weather-worn and half-hidden by brush, I pulled off onto the dirt path. The land was overgrown, the kind of wild growth that only happens when no one's tended to it for decades. Brambles tugged at my jeans as I pushed deeper into the property, following the vague outline of what used to be a service road. Then I saw it, the sagging shack by the quarry's edge, its roof caved in, windows shattered. A place frozen in time. I forced myself inside. The air smelled of damp wood and rust. Old tools lay scattered across the floor, long abandoned. But it was the trapdoor in the corner, half hidden beneath a sheet of corrugated metal, that made my chest seize. My father had brought me here once, years ago, but he never let me near that hatch. Said it was unsafe. Said the tunnels ran deep and unstable. My hands shook as I pried the metal back. The wood beneath was rotting, but the iron ring was still there. I pulled, and the door groaned open, releasing a gust of air so foul it made me gag. I aimed my flashlight down. Stairs, concrete, crumbling, leading into blackness. For a long time, I just stood there, light trembling in my hand. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to bury the deed, to pretend none of this was mine. But something stronger pulled me down. Step by step, I descended into the dark, where the smell grew sharper, like rust, like rot, like something that had been waiting far too long to be found. The air grew colder with every step, damp against my skin, my flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the black. The concrete stairs ended at a tunnel carved roughly into stone, the ceiling low, the walls slick with decades of seepage. My breath echoed, each step sounding too loud, like I was intruding on something that didn't want to be disturbed. I moved slowly, the beam sliding across rusted barrels stacked haphazardly against the walls. Their labels had long since faded, but the chemical stench clinging to the air told me enough. Owen had been right. This place was a dumping ground. But then I saw something that made my knees buckle. The beam caught the edge of a shoe. Leather, cracked and stiff with age. I froze, swallowing hard, and swept the light wider. What emerged from the dark wasn't debris. It was a body, collapsed against the wall, clothing disintegrating, a skull tilted toward me in permanent silence. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would burst. I staggered back, but my foot slipped on something soft. I pointed the light down and saw another. And another. They weren't buried. They were left here, discarded like trash, hidden where no one would ever look. Some still had chains clamped around their wrists or ankles, eaten through with rust. I clamped a hand over my mouth, while rising in my throat. Daniel hadn't lied. He hadn't even exaggerated. The land wasn't just dangerous, it was a graveyard. My flashlight beam flickered, and in that unstable light, I caught something else. Faint spray-painted markings on the stone walls. Symbols, letters, maybe initials. Not random graffiti, these looked like codes. Coordinates, maybe. Records of what was dumped, and when. I forced myself to snap a few photos with my phone, hands trembling so badly the images blurred. Proof. Proof that could bury Koval, and maybe everyone tied to him. But then, faintly, behind me, I heard something. A scrape. The unmistakable sound of footsteps on concrete. I wasn't alone. The sound froze me in place. My flashlight shook in my grip, its beam jittering across the walls as the echo of footsteps carried through the tunnel. Slow, deliberate. Not the shuffle of an animal. These were human. Someone was down here with me. I killed the light, plunging myself into darkness. My heart thudded in my throat, and I pressed myself against the damp wall, straining to listen. The footsteps grew closer, followed by the faint rasp of metal scraping stone, like someone dragging a pipe or crowbar. I held my breath. Whoever it was, they knew these tunnels. I was the intruder. Then a voice, low and rough, floated through the dark. Told you someone would come sniffing around sooner or later. A second voice answered, younger, sharper. Boss said to check, and here we are. Shine the light. A sudden glare seared my eyes. Their flashlights snapped on, sweeping across the tunnel. I ducked low, shielding myself behind a barrel. Through the cracks, I saw them. 2 men, heavy jackets, one with a shaved head, the other wiry with a scar down his cheek. Their boots crunched over gravel as they approached the bodies I'd just seen. Scar voice spat on the ground. Rotten ghosts. Why the hell would anyone come down here? The bald one knelt, checking one of the corpses like he was used to the sight. Doesn't matter. If anyone saw this, Koval would be finished. That's why we make sure no one does. My chest tightened. These weren't just scavengers, they were Koval's men. And if they found me, I'd end up rotting beside the others. I slipped a hand into my pocket, fumbling for my phone. Just one photo sent, one message, and someone would know what was here. But the floor betrayed me. A shard of glass cracked under my boot. Both flashlights swung my way. There, Scar voice shouted. And suddenly the tunnel exploded with light and footsteps as they charged straight toward me. The beam of their flashlights burned into my eyes, blinding me. Adrenaline surged through my veins and instinct took over. I bolted. My shoes pounded against the slick concrete, echoing through the tunnels like war drums. Shouts chased after me, rough voices bouncing off the stone walls, and the scrape of boots grew louder with every step. The passage twisted, narrow and uneven, forcing me to keep the flashlight off and rely on memory. My hands skimmed the walls to guide me, skin tearing against jagged stone. Behind me, light flared, shadows stretching long and monstrous across the tunnel. Stop! You can't run forever, one of them barked. I pushed harder, lungs burning, but the tunnel forked unexpectedly. Left or right? My chest heaved as I chose left, skidding around the corner. The air grew heavier, thicker with rot. My flashlight flicked on just long enough to reveal more barrels stacked like crooked tombstones, leaking foul liquid onto the ground. The stench made my stomach convulse, but I pressed on, feet slipping in the sludge. A loud crash erupted behind me. One of them had stumbled into the barrels. His partner cursed, but the stumble bought me precious seconds. I sprinted, desperate for an exit. Up ahead, a faint glow broke through the darkness. Daylight. My heart leapt. I barreled forward, my breath ragged, until the tunnel opened to a half-collapsed grate. Rusted metal bars bent inward, leaving just enough space to squeeze through. I dropped to my knees and crawled, scraping my arms raw as I shoved myself into the gap. Behind me, footsteps thundered closer. Fingers brushed my ankle. I kicked back violently, hearing a grunt of pain. Then I forced myself forward, wriggling until I burst out onto damp earth, the cool night air slapping my face. I staggered to my feet, gulping oxygen like water. The opening yawned behind me, shadows shifting within, voices cursing as they realized they couldn't squeeze through as quickly. I didn't wait to see if they'd find another way out. I stumbled toward the tree lean, branches clawing at my clothes, until I collapsed on the forest floor. For a long moment, I just lay there, chest heaving, body trembling. But even as fear consumed me, I couldn't ignore the truth. I had proof now. Proof of what Daniel had warned me about. Proof of what Koval had buried. And with that proof came a question I couldn't escape. What the hell was I going to do with it? I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the tunnel, the bodies, the chains, the symbols scrawled on the stone, and the faces of the men who had chased me, certain I'd end up as another nameless ghost down there. By the 3rd day, I knew running wasn't an option. Koval's reach was too long, his men too relentless. If I disappeared into silence, Daniel would vanish too, and no one would ever know what lay beneath that land. My father's name, my family's legacy, it would all rot in the dark. So I made a choice. If Koval wanted the deed, he'd have to face me. I called Daniel and told him to meet me at the quarry. When I arrived, he was already there, pacing nervously by the shack. His face lit with relief when he saw me, but I cut him off with a glare. "This ends tonight," I said. Headlights split the trees, 2 black SUVs rolling up the dirt path. Doors opened, and Merrick Koval stepped out. He was older than I expected, tall and broad, his silver hair combed neatly, his suit immaculate despite the mud. His eyes were pale and cold, scanning me like I was already a corpse. "You must be the brother," he said, voice smooth. "Daniel's told me a lot about you." I held up the deed. "This is what you want." But I've been down there, Koval. I know what's buried. I've seen it. For the first time, his expression cracked. Just a flicker, but enough. He took a step closer, his men fanning out behind him. Then you know why it can't come to light. My phone was already recording in my pocket, the photos from the tunnels backed up to the cloud. I let a thin smile slip. It already has. If anything happens to me, if you lay a hand on either of us, the truth spreads. Everyone sees what you've been hiding. The silence that followed was suffocating. Koval studied me for what felt like hours. Then he turned, his face hardening again. You're smarter than your brother. Pity. He motioned to his men, and just like that, they retreated to the SUVs. Engines roared, and the night swallowed them. Daniel sagged with relief, clutching his knees. I thought we were dead. I looked at him, my chest hollow. We almost were. Because of you. He flinched, but didn't argue. For once, he had nothing left to say. As dawn broke over the quarry, I realized something. Koval was gone, for now. But the past wasn't. It would haunt us, in news reports, in whispered rumors, in every nightmare I had from that day forward. Still, I felt something else too. Not victory, not peace, just clarity. For the first time in years, Daniel and I stood in the same place. Both of us broken, both of us exposed. And I knew I'd never forgive him. But I also knew I'd never let him bury me again. Because the truth was finally mine. And no one, not Koval, not Daniel, not the ghosts beneath the earth, could take that away.